What's poppin'? It's your boy Brett Pill Black, and today I'm doing another episode of PragerUggh. This time they're going to talk about critical race theory, and I'm going to watch them misrepresent it and essentially fearmonger while pointing out how they're wrong. Will the racial stupidity shine through from PragerU? Of course it will. Anyway, let's get it.
Have you heard about critical race theory? I'm guessing you probably have. It has already insinuated itself into many institutions and is making rapid progress into others. If it takes hold, it will completely change the very nature of America and the way you live. Critical race theory holds that the most important thing about you is your race. The color of your skin, that's who you are. Not your behavior, not your values, not your environment. Your race.
Okay, so we're 30 seconds in, and this person's already lied 3 times. Like, who even is this guy? You know what? It doesn't even matter. He's just some white guy upset about people wanting to talk about race critically because it makes him uncomfortable. Fuck what he said about critical race theory. I'll tell you what it is from the source. The 3rd edition of the race theory says the critical race theory movement is a collection of activists and scholars engaged in studying and transforming the relationship between race, racism, and power. The movement considers many of the same issues that conventional civil rights and ethics studies discourses take, but places them in a broader perspective that includes economics, history, setting, group, self-interest, emotions, and the unconscious. Conservatives want to say it's just about race because they honestly don't know what it is. They just think it will make people hate America and white people even more. Learning in detail about racism isn't going to change America either. It will make a lot of folks, mainly white people, uncomfortable, but that is okay. Because I'm sure more people are uncomfortable having to deal with racism and living through it than having to talk about it. Also, when looking at systemic racism and how it affects groups of people, the individual does not matter at all.
In critical race theory, if you are a member of a minoritized racial group, their term, not mine, you are a victim of a system that is rigged against you, a system that doesn't want you to succeed. On the other hand, if your race is privileged, you're an exploiter, whether you intend to be or not. Critical race theory begins from the assumption that racism occurs in all interactions.
In a country built on white supremacy, like the United States, for example, that is true for the most part. If you aren't white, you have multiple systems rigged against you, and you have more hurdles in your life because of your skin color. It's just a fact. If you're white, you usually benefit from the exploitation and disenfranchisement of people of color. That's what we call white privilege. It's a bad thing, but this ever-confused tub of mayonnaise makes it seem like it's hypothetical instead of what it is, the reality of the situation. Racism may not appear in all interactions, but it does in plenty and usually for the worst. So that shouldn't be ignored.
To see how this works, consider this thought experiment. Imagine you own a shop and 2 customers enter at the same time, one white and one black. Who do you help first? If you help the black person first, critical race theory would say you did so because you don't trust black people to be left alone in your store. That's racist. If you help the white person first instead, critical race theory would say you did so because you think blacks are second-class citizens. That's racist too. That's critical race theory. It can find racism in anything, even if it has to read your mind to do it.
That doesn't seem like critical race theory. It just seems like dude not understanding what it is and conservative projection. He wants to complain about people finding racism in anything, but in this country, it's true. We can look at all institutions and even individual interactions and find racism there. To fix the problem in the first place, we have to address it. Critical race theory is an interdisciplinary body of scholarship that emerged in the aftermath of the civil rights movement as legal theorists grappled with naming and challenging the persistence of racism after the fall of de jure segregation. Racism didn't appear, so acting like it has little to no influence to this day is just lies. And that's what conservative thought slime is full of. I forgot to mention, do these people not know what implicit bias is? Because it really seems like they don't.
Critical race theory is a uniquely American invention. Brewed up at Harvard Law School in the 70s, now part of the academic and media mainstream, it is also uniquely un-American because it rejects the core tenets of the American classically liberal Judeo-Christian value system. It turns the bedrock American idea upside down.
Yes, it rejects white supremacy. I've been on the internet for a while now. When people talk about Judeo-Christian, classic, liberal, whatever, they just mean whiteness in a white supremacist nation. Whenever they bring up actual universities and colleges, they just dismiss it because ivory tower elites want to ruin white people. I mean America. You get what I mean? It's un-American because it questions the white supremacist foundation of this country. And they honestly say it like it's a bad thing when it's something we should be doing.
Here it is in the words of Richard Delgado and Gene Stefanchik, two leading proponents. Critical race theory questions the very foundations of the liberal order, including equality theory, legal reasoning, Enlightenment rationalism, and the neutral principles of constitutional law. It does this because critical race theory proponents assume racism is present everywhere and always, and they look for it critically until they find it. And they always find it. It has to be there because that's how the imperial European powers and then America set things up.
This isn't a hypothetical thing. Racism came as a byproduct of European capitalists needing an excuse as to why they could enslave and treat black people as chattel slaves. They created the concept of race and then used that concept to treat black people and people of color like they were less than for hundreds of years. Shoot, it's still happening now. You can fuck right off, honestly. Slavery, Jim Crow, American prison complex, war on drugs, which was really a war on black and brown people. Like, systemic racism is still a thing, and the people they were elected by were mainly white people. Like, I'm not saying fuck whitey or anything like that, that would just be stupid. But we have to be honest about this history, especially in America. Racist ass white supremacist America. I didn't even go into global colonization the Europeans did for hundreds of years to South America, China, India, Africa, and many other countries.
Here, as in all dangerous academic theories, there is a kernel of truth. Human beings were not preoccupied with race until the 16th century, when Europeans began to explore and then colonize other parts of the world. Drawing distinctions between the races reached its peak in the 19th century with the widespread use of slave labor in North and South America. No one denies this. But since then, the Western world, and most especially America, has spent a lot of time, money, and blood breaking free of its racist past. It's been a rocky road for sure, but great progress has been made.
You don't deny it, but you do downplay it. Hell, for the most part, conservatives like Dennis Prager whitewash it. What racist past? We're still living in a racist present. You won't forget that 5 years ago we had a white supremacist president, a stupid one at that started off his campaign by saying Mexico is full of rapists, drug dealers, and killers, and saying that African countries were shithole countries. Like, we don't have a domestic terrorist problem where right-wingers are killing people because they're brown. There have been progress in the fight for equality. We went from slaves to having a nigga in the White House. But there's still much more to do. Much, much more. To quote Malcolm X, "If you stick a knife in my back 9 inches and pull it out 6 inches, that's not progress. If you pull it out all the way, that's not progress. Progress is healing the wound the blow made." They haven't pulled the knife out. Like, shoot, they won't even admit it's there.
Critical race theory says all this progress is a mirage. Racism never died, never even faded a little bit. It just hid itself better. Critical race theory, therefore, is not a continuation of the civil rights movement. It is, in fact, a repudiation of it. To critical race theorists, Martin Luther King was both wrong and naive. White Americans can never judge blacks by the content of their character. They can only judge them, always unfavorably, consciously or unconsciously, by the color of their skin.
That's because it is a mirage, and racism did become more covert. We're still dealing with systemic racism today. We're dealing with worse segregation levels than in the 50s. Black-white wealth inequality is highest than it's ever been, and much, much more. Also, MLK was a dem sock from what I've read, against war and poverty and all that stuff. So don't act like you actually care about what he has to say because you want some weak dunk on CRT. Like, they are really advocating for stuff he's for. Also, boo-hoo, poor white people being upset that people saying they're racist for being racist. Being colorblind doesn't stop you from being racist.
Ironically, Not since the Aryan obsession in Germany in the 1930s and 1940s, or South African apartheid in the second half of the 20th century, has the social movement been so obsessed with race. Critical race theory is then, in a very real sense, a counter-American revolution. But that's a positive, not a negative to those who subscribe to the theory. The American experiment was given a 400-year tryout, and it doesn't work. So let's scrap it.
Did this dude just really compare critical race theory to Nazis? Are they deadass? I deadass don't know how to respond to this. It's funny though. It's funny because saying being against white supremacy and critically analyzing racial injustice is an American counter-revolution. I have to listen to the part they did not speak out loud to get what they actually mean. And what they're saying is actually critiquing and saying something about the racism in this country is un-American. But yet they swear they're not racist.
That's what they believe. Is that what you believe? I'm going to guess that most of you don't. So how do we stop critical race theory before it infects the brains of too many decent Americans, especially young people, and turns us into something we have never been and shouldn't ever want to be? The answer is simple. Refuse to accept it. Don't be intimidated by the heads I win, tails you lose logic of this self-destructive, America-hating, anti-reality idea. Don't be bullied into thinking that you're racist when you know you're not, or that you're a victim when you know you're not. Defend yourself, while you still can. I'm James Lindsay, founder of New Discourses for Prager University.
This is a graph I found online when I just Googled critical race theory, and it really just disproves what most of the video says anyway. Like, these people have no idea what they're talking about. This is just a hush-hush version of anti-racism is anti-white. Except they're saying critical race theory is anti-American, the same way they said that Black Lives Matter is anti-American. You see how they continue in that? Never been and shouldn't want to be, you mean educated about racism? These people tell others that learn about critical race theory is bad, and it's really not, because you're just teaching about a way of life and way laws have been made for like the past 500 years that we're still dealing with today. Like, the white fragility and racial stupidity are shining through with this flavorless cracker in a soup. Also, anti-reality. That's some tough talk from people who don't believe in climate change. Who don't believe in climate change, refuse to accept the validity of trans people, and can't even admit that systemic racism is real and still hurting people today. You deny white supremacy. This country is white supremacist in nature and socializes its citizens to be it. It's why so many people will support racism and racists and then say they aren't racist. These people need to accept that people of color are victims in this country, and instead of fixing the systems that cause the victimizations, they just want to say don't be one. Seriously, where do they find these people? Anyway, it's been your boy Bread Pill Black. Thanks for watching. Please make sure to leave a like and subscribe. I don't really care if you share it. Right? And last but not least, fuck PragerUggh.